Welcome to And It's Live, the podcast which dives deep into football's most iconic seasons, stories, and what ifs. If you love football, history, tactics, and nostalgia, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell, and drop us a like on YouTube so you don't miss an episode. Hello and welcome to the main event, the history of the Champions League. I am your host, Martin, as always, and I'm joined as ever by my two dear friends and experts in all things Champions League. Adam Thornton, how are we?
Good, thank you. Looking forward to chatting about some of the teams in here. I think Group F's a really spicy group in this one, so looking forward to seeing what's what.
David, how are we doing?
Oh, I'm great. It's a Jose week and Jose season, so I'm happy. I think we've gone a few weeks without talking about him, which I know will have pained him, and certainly, but that's
Didn't
such
pain
an
me.
interesting chapter. No, that's the thing. Yeah, I know that the words Jose Mourinho, Bayern Munich, Juventus are like daggers to your heart, or rather are incentives to go and put the kettle on and make a cup of tea and let me and Martin deal with it. But this is such an interesting. There surely needs a book written about this era Mourinho. Such an interesting spell, which of course everyone says, oh, he'll fall out with Abramovich, and eventually he falls out with Abramovich. You cannot deny that the man delivers the ending that people want so often.
He is in career regression now, and I think Adam and I kind of pinpointed that moment at semi-final against Bayern Munich 2012, wasn't it? Was it, and he fighting within himself, fighting with the world pretty much ever since. This return to Chelsea, never go back, and it was kind of weird. It was all known. Rafa Benitez was in and won the Europa League season before, and is there a chance you stay? And I said, well, no, because everyone knows and who's coming back.
With a wee smile.
It was, of course, Mourinho and Little Horses, because they started well, I think, in the league, and people were kind of talking about, because obviously it's Chelsea and it's him, and he's much beloved in England, or was at the time. You must be thinking about the title, and no, we're just Little Horses. And he was right. They did run out of steam. They would win it the following season when he got a striker. But Davey, and I'm banging on about how important symbolic, significant summers are. It is kind of telling about where Mourinho is. It's quite a prosaic kind of place. I know he's not got that much control, and don't really believe that, to be honest. But Andre Schürrle comes in from Bayer Leverkusen, a much underrated player. Willian would, I think, prove his worth over the piece. I don't think that's unfair, but not really setting the heather alight as he maybe had in previous years.
No, and you're absolutely correct about the influence. Now, I would argue that Mourinho's influence gets exerted regardless of whether the club wishes him to do so or not. To wit, in this particular summer, Abramovich and his and Mourinho's relationship, I just think is absolutely fascinating. But Jose wants the Manchester United job. Everybody knows it. Everybody and their dog knows it. And he doesn't get it. And he's offended at not getting it. And he's offended at who does get it. And the offer he has on the table is Chelsea. So he goes back to Chelsea. It reminded me of that episode of The Simpsons where Homer goes to get his job back at the power plant. And there's one door marked applicants and one smaller door marked supplicants. And I always wondered if it was like that. There's no massive splurge, and Jose is told that you will not get all the players you want. And Chelsea bring in Schürrle, who I agree with you, Martin, who was better for them than people's memory might suggest. He didn't really command your attention, did he, Andrea Schürrle, or certainly your memory, but he was a very good player. World Cup winner, of course, and he did contribute quite heavily to Chelsea. The one they were quite interested in, or quite excited about, was Marco Van Ginkel. And Jose Mourinho particularly want him. He wanted Nemanja Matic of Benfica at the time. So Jose does, but he said, well, that's fine. I'm happy. The club have wanted this player. Makes it bloody clear through his media duties that he thinks this guy isn't very good. Doesn't play him. Then goes to the board and January. She says, I told you he was rubbish. Can I have Matic now? And they get him. And as Martin pointed out, 18 months later, they win the Chelsea. And I don't think anyone would argue Nemanja Matic wasn't a superb player for Chelsea. But he's back, and I always got the impression, which is a strange thing to say because there's a title delivered in here, that football affiliation, unlike love, is seldom more wonderful the second time around, because there is a sense of doing what you've done before, and I got that all through this spell of Jose. Now you two are right and say that he isn't the same guy anyway. That there are now scars, there are now neuroses, Barcelona thing, the way football is going, all of that. But this era for me marks his lapse into that sort of caricature, and it begins through this where he was almost more interested or seemed to be more committed to the press conference than he was to, which is unfair because Chelsea do pretty well, but he just didn't have that command of his world that he did in his first spell at Chelsea. And look, we all get older and that happens to us, but he just didn't seem quite as ferocious and full on.
And didn't win anything.
But that first year, no.
Which is unusual. Even if it's a cup or whatever. It's very close, of course, to the Champions League final, which we'll get to in due course, but it's not quite the same. A lot of love for Schürrle. That he just was coming through a generation, Adam, of great German players and had to kind of bide his time. He was the one when Germany were 5-0 up against Brazil in that semi-final at half-time. They're like, right, just go through the motions. We don't want to embarrass anyone. And they brought him on. He said, fuck this, man. Have you seen this defence? This is a World Cup semi-final. I'm getting twatted right in here. And he scored 2 brilliant goals as well.
I agree.
He was good. And the kind of pantomime thing, go to Anfield at the end of that season and Gerrard slips and it's almost like the real quiz and kind of stopping Liverpool in the title, which in fact he didn't. It was Rodgers and he kind of tactical inflexibility that did for that, but it's becoming a bit punch and judy. They do win the group, Adam, but again, it's not the best. Steaua Bucharest, rock bottom. Schalke 04 go with them in second place. They go through to the last 16. But FC Basel caused Chelsea all sorts of problems, Adam, in that first game at the Bridge, and they beat them in Switzerland, and a certain Mohamed Salah scored in both games, and he would be on his way to Chelsea that winter as well, and a fractured relationship, I suppose.
I actually forgot that they played each other before this, so it was one of those ones that he's sort of obviously he scored against us twice. We like the look at him, let's bring him in.
I love that old school football. Manchester United ran for that through the 80s.
I'd missed that little bit of trivia, so there you go. We still can learn things at the end. I just find this a bit meh. Chelsea at this time, I think there's some decent players in there. There's a lot of. I think it sort of sums it up. They're not in a great space here. Basel at this point, what do we think about them? Obviously,
there's some good players in here. They've got Jan Sommer, who I think is one of the most consistent goalkeepers in Europe for a number of years. They obviously have Salah, but there's Marek Suchi, the Czech centre back, who was pretty good. There's a young Mohamed El Neni, who goes on to Arsenal. Breel Mbomo, who I've always liked. I've always thought was a pretty decent striker. And Fabian Schär has since gone on to have a fantastic career.
It's funny that I noticed Kurt Zouma went to Chelsea this year, and Fabian Schär, very young. I think I wouldn't have even expected them to be about at this point. They're both Zouma. He was a teenager when he went to Chelsea, wasn't he? But Fabian Schär, I wouldn't have thought was kicking about at this time. So it's funny. They do have a pretty decent team. Here they had, I don't think he was here at this point. I think he'd retired, but Marco Strela was one that I always quite liked.
Strela.
And Alex
Fry they had as well. They had Marek Yakin as their manager.
Strela's still there. Scored against
Chelsea. He was a decent. He was a decent manager, but this is a good crop of players, and those are two headline grabbing results. Chelsea doing the utter big club bastard thing of, right, you've had your fun, we're having your good player, although all they did was really tune him up. So come and learn about English football. This De Bruyne lad will show you around, and then we're just going to let you go. But Adam's right. This is a group which there's always one, I think, and this is very much in that category of, you look at it, and apart from the 4 teams, I don't think many people would care too much about it, and that's not derogatory. It's just there's a lot of teams, so that will happen. Schalke still cutting about this stage, but the previous group obviously, but No, I liked this FC Basel team. And this, of course, was the absolute height of FC Basel and the pronunciation of their name. Is it FC Basel? Is it Ball? I don't know. Could any speakers let us know, because we don't want to offend?
Just depends if you speak French or German, really, or what area of the city.
I don't want it to be Bal, if that helps, because I find it more difficult to pronounce.
It's like Cannes and Rennes in France. It would be easier if it was Cannes and Rennes, but it isn't. But no, this is a good side, and the thing is, though, that this is not us going back because we know what Mohamed Salah became. At the time, there was a lot of chat about him, and he was scoring, a lot of goals, but he was tearing it up in the Champions League. This was a side that people were looking at and saying this is ripe for the picking. There is talent in this team, and you can pick them up at reasonable amounts of money. So they were very briefly a kind of hipster's choice, but once this team got picked apart, which was inevitable, story as old as time, they didn't reinvest the money quite as well as they might have. And to be fair, not many Swiss sides are going to get their hands on a Mohamed Salah, so he's not going to come along into Swiss football very often.
I know what you mean, Adam. It is so dreary. And there's an element about that, but maybe even all four of the groups we talked about last week in terms of what's going to happen. The gulf is huge. Teams do not have to be at their best at this stage of the season and still coast through. And that's exactly the story of Chelsea here. It is not the story of Group F, which is an absolute banger. Now, there is a whipping boy. It's Marseille. Boo-hoo, 0 points. So you have three other teams taking all the points, and they do. All of them finish on 12. All of them lose 2 games to one another. It's exactly what group football should be. Can beat one another, points getting taken here, there, and everywhere, legs getting cut away, and it is Borussia Dortmund beating finals last year, of course, Arsenal and Napoli. It's Napoli that miss out, David, even though they beat Arsenal in that final game. So in a way, makes it look tighter than it maybe was. I guess the lesson that just isn't learned here is that Arsenal went to Italy needing a point to win the group, and by winning the group, getting an easy last 16 game, or an easier last 16. They never learn because they don't manage that point. They are defeated, they come second, and they're going to face, yet again, Bayern Munich. And it was just one of the most frustrating things of that Arsenal side, that they just didn't seem to understand how the draw worked. But you're talking about no one watching Group E unless they've supported the 4 teams. This was fun for those neutrals, or indeed those fans of teams who were not playing football with the fuck and therefore had to just feast upon whatever relevant football they possibly could.
Oh, I feel seen by that, and so should both of you. Yes, that's great, isn't it? And it comes down to 2 goals. That's the difference from first to third, because in the head-to-head, they've all taken the same amounts of points against each other. So the goal difference at the end is Dortmund +1, Arsenal, because the goal difference is just based on the head-to-heads. Dortmund +1, Arsenal 0, Napoli -1. Isn't that a bit? How tight? Just needed another goal, but you're spot on. And a bit of indiscipline here from Mikel Arteta, who's on a yellow card. And I know that, having seen him now as a manager, people might be surprised to think of him losing his head. I know that. Look, I'm as stunned as you are. And picks up a second yellow. He goes off when they're a goal down. They end up, of course, conceding in injury time. This was an exciting Napoli side, because Napoli, everyone who's remotely a bit of a football hipster likes Napoli, and we all know why, right? The strip, Maradona, and they had some doldrums, but it's an exciting side. There's some really good players in here. Dries Mertens, Gonzalo Higuain, of course, Callahan, quality players in this side. But they're beginning to punch a little bit. They're beginning to punch in Europe, which they haven't done really the whole of this show, have they? Particularly, they haven't delivered much. And Arsenal are in such a good position. But you're absolutely right, man. There's something with Arsenal in the Champions League that they have to find a way of putting themselves into the most difficult situation possible in the latter stages, and they managed somehow to do it again. 2 cracking games with Borussia Dortmund, which actually end in 2 away victories.
Away wins against him, City.
Dortmund beating them in the first one at the Emirates, but then losing the return over there in Germany. And it's such a great group. Napoli flying the flag. You're absolutely right about Marseille, who are very much there to make up the numbers and give points to the opposition. And this is 3 excellent sides who are really going at it. But in a way, I think Napoli were the surprise package to maybe people in the UK, because Dortmund, named but previous year's finalists, Arsenal, huge name. But Napoli were a right good side and an improving side, and tough to play against. And I'll turn this one over to Adam, because Adam, I would say that this Napoli side were a bit of an iteration of tactics now are more important than just signing the right players, or they were a side who had a system and they had the right players for the system and they moved the ball quickly and they were very difficult to play against. And we see that here. This is 12 points in this group for them is a great achievement when you consider the lack of Champions League experience at this point.
Put them in the same bracket as, albeit not as successful at this stage, but the same bracket as Atlético Madrid, where they're well set up. They've got a really good team, really good strike force, solid everywhere. I think they are. I think for me, this is where football, as I said before, is getting a bit stale in general. Before gegenpressing and tiki-taka really kick on, it's been 4-2, 3-1 since 2000, probably at this stage. Which
Euro
is
2000, yeah.
There'll be a few aberrations as you would expect, but generally, and I think it's all got a little bit samey. You maybe had the inverted wingers coming in and this and that. But I do think that they are no different, I think, here, but I guess the difference for me is team, club, I should say, and liked the players within it. Bit of a surprise, I guess, that late stage Wenger's Arsenal go through on their defensive record. That's not something that really I would have seen. I think this is just 2 teams that they come up against here that are difficult for them. We talk about, Arsenal could do this, Arsenal could do that.
It's a hard group.
It's a hard, and it's one of those groups you look at and say, well, in present day, well, is that really hard for Arsenal? But again, this is what we mentioned there, where Premier League teams have got a lot better, and also the top 10 Premier League teams, the standards there from Team 6 to Team 10 now in the Premier League is insanely better than it was 10, 15 years ago. Those teams would be challenging your Napolis and your Dortmunds now if they were playing in European football. So it just shows the comparison there, because you still think, Arsenal should, in present day, Arsenal should be, but at this stage, I think both of these teams are better, to be honest. They're well coached, better. They've got probably on a par, if not better, players overall. We've spoke about the decline. They're more physical, which is a big thing coming that we spoke about Wenger or doesn't adapt to. So I'm not going to say it's a shock that Arsenal go through, because that would just be silly. But if it had went any other way, I don't think I'd have been massively surprised.
I think Arsenal lost on the opening game of the season at home to Villa, and again, a lot of fans would never spend the money. This has been a quiet window. Deadline day, Mesut Ozil comes in with 40-odd million from Real Madrid, and I do remember some high-profile Arsenal fans saying, right, that's the key that's going to unlock everything slightly.
Because they didn't do that. They didn't.
No, they didn't.
They wouldn't do it. So, yeah.
So atypical, but again, see that phrase that you used there, Martin, that we hear a lot, that people say, key. Only, I don't believe that one player can come into a side with structural deficiencies, which this Arsenal team had, and change it that much.
No,
not now.
It's wishful thinking for fans.
Yeah, maybe even 30 years ago, maybe you could sign one player.
I don't even buy that. I don't even buy that, even with Diego at Napoli. I think it's just we're so desperate for superheroes. It's shite. I think a signing can make a difference, because you've got everything else and you're just lacking, let's say, a goal scorer. Everything else is in place, and wow, right, that's us. We're away and go. Influence in the dressing room, like Cantona. United they weren't miles away, because they did that famous failure the year before and all that. But I think it probably was more back midst of time, but I still don't really too much.
You couldn't teams, as we've seen time after time doing these shows, this Arsenal team was structurally not built. It didn't have a strong enough defence. It was reliant on
it's not athletic enough.
Not physical, it's not athletic, it's not quick enough. And that is my memory of these ties in particular. The games they lost, they were outrun and outworked by sides who I would say were a bit more modern, believe it or not, than because was always seen as this coach. But by now he's so locked into what he wants to do, which is his gang of elves that play lovely, bewitching football. This was just a new thing. This was German style that had come through, that would be crowned the World Cup, but we'd seen with Bayern is away, and he's done what he's done at Barcelona, but he's now sort of refining it at Bayern, and he'll go to City and refine it there as well. And strange as it may sound, this Arsenal team, when I look at it now, I think kind of out of step, out of era.
Yeah. Well done, Borussia Dortmund. Adam, before we move on, beating finalists, of course. Leeson, they sell Mario Götze, who didn't really have the career he probably should have. Huge moment, of course, a World Cup final in the season. But what did they do with that money? What, Aubameyang and Mkhitaryan, anything else in there? Pretty much in step.
Not a huge amount, really. They bring in Greek centre half, don't they? Papastopoulos. Got in as well this year. Magic a little bit for me here. I think obviously Lewandowski still on fire, but they're doing that thing where they're bringing in decent players that I don't 100% think fit what they've got their success with, if that makes sense. And it's that eternal balance of no team. I don't think we speak about this all the time, but there's very few teams, I should say, that go more than 3 years of getting things right. I think by that I mean the manager can get players that he wants in the first couple of transfer windows. They have a good season the first season, maybe a fantastic season in the second season, and the third season they do fine, but it then sort of hit crux. I think these signings, to me, again, hindsight, blah, 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 these signings to me are, here's some players that we think are quite good. They don't scream pressing monsters, all that sort of stuff. It's just, here's some good players. We're a big club now. We should act like a big club, and big clubs buy expensive players rather than what expensive players fit the system that we have. So Klopp will very much that trend when he moves to Liverpool. But yeah, just feels like that for me. Obviously, the season after collapse, finish. I think it is maybe even 8th in the Bundesliga, and there's just a little bit of it coming here. I think they don't have the same verve for the full season I think that they've got before. I don't think Mario Götze was particularly fantastic with them. That is the sort of start, I think, of let's just pick the best Dortmund player and move him to Bayern type stick, which I don't know if they just feel like there's just going to be a glass ceiling there anyway. It's so tough to battle through. You might get through once, but they'll just take your best player every year if you do. So there's maybe a little bit of that going on as well. They've done so well to get to where they got to. Maybe they don't have that appetite that you speak about a lot, Martin, to then go on and be, don't have the finances to go on and be that sort of consistent, dominant club. So they almost just try and start making sensible moves, and it doesn't really quite work for them, I would say.
Yeah, distance from good to great is infinitely longer than decent to good. I think it's fair to say in sport. That group was superb. Don't know how many lips were being licked. Group G, Austria Vienna, Porto, Zenit, and Atletico Madrid. Would be Zenit that would go in second place, but one of the more of the group stage was Atleti's points, wins, and a solitary draw. What would be a good season for Simeone's team? League champions in the end. They're going to go a long way in this final. Very close to a remarkable double. He's an incredible character, Davey. I mean, he went to Atletico Madrid, I think, as a manager in 2011. He's still there at the time of recording. That's in this era of the intense coach. He is an intense coach. That is bizarre. I guess the pressures around Atleti are not quite the same as the neighbours or indeed Barcelona, but still that remarkable, very tough team, a bastard team, in the best possible sense, with the added cuteness of David Villa this season, which what a treat. My boy up front, 36 goals in 53 games or something like that. Remarkable. Big man.
Yeah, it is a right good side. And they were coached to within an inch of their life. I think it's fair to say. This to me is, even now when I think of an Atleti team, because I don't think it's changed that much really in the intervening decade, this is sort of the template for it, Martin. This is what I think about, that you've got the rampaging bastard up front, in front of a midfield containing super talented, industrious players, in front of a defence of four bastards. And team, they weren't easy on the eye, I think it's fair to say, but they were very good at what they did. And they were relentless. They were as relentless as we know on the sidelines and over and above all the gamesmanship. But the thing that raises them, we spoke in the last show about Juventus being a functional side. This was an Atleti team that was functional but could run over the top of sides in a way that Juventus team couldn't. And that was because of that firepower. David Villa, such an intelligent player, just a wonderful player to watch throughout his career. It brings a touch of class and composure, but the big man, Martin, you mentioned it. We know where he's going the following season and what he's going to do there, but he was pretty much unplayable at times throughout that season. And as you mentioned, they're just scoring goals for fun. But not only that, I think in Europe, he gave them that, he made them almost impossible to play against, because they were very good with the ball in the middle of the park, but they had that option to go long when they needed to, and they had no problem with doing it. One thing you can never say about any Atleti team under Simeone is he's never been a slave to fashion within football. They do what
or indeed
they
fashion.
Do. No, I think he's always looked. Don't you think?
Black, just all. But it just hasn't changed. I mean,
no, but then it never goes out of fashion. See, that's the thing. If you go for a classic look, it never goes out. But you're speaking to a teenage goth here, so of course I'm going to admire a man in an all black suit. But yeah, Atleti, this, as I say, to me, is the template side. And I think we did begin to notice them in this group stage, as I didn't think they would get as far as they got. But they were so impressive in the way that they did this. And as you mentioned, just, I think having David Villa there at this point in his career is a legend. So, you know, as we mentioned there about transfers that don't change a whole side, but you can have a transfer that sort of elevates you in the eyes of people, and Villa to me was one of those. But I loved watching Costa this season in particular. I loved watching him when he was at his best anyway. I wasn't a supporter of any of the sides that he came up against, so the whole to mind villain thing, actually, I found it great to watch. But this is a very good side. It's solid as all hell. It outworked, and it didn't need the ball, which is very handy when you're away from home in Europe.
Yeah, I mean, from Godin to Costa, I mean, it's just a toughness through it, Adam. A couple of things, or a few things. The goalkeeper's on loan from Chelsea, of course. I would become one of, if not the best goalkeeper in the world at one point. Run of strikers from Forlan, Aguero, Falcao, and then they come up with this guy Costa. It just seemed like they were just always finding number nines. Okay, did he get the flowers he deserved? I always thought he was a really smart, consistent midfielder.
I think he's a system guy before system guys were really a thing, to be honest. A few like that in that team that's, I spoke about it earlier on, the system, as much as you can have some great players in it, the system still trumps it for Simeone. Absolutely, I would agree. It's not changed a lot in many aspects. So no, he probably didn't. One of those players that you might, I guess, Spanish midfielders being very in vogue, maybe a little bit of a surprise. I know he came close a couple of times to potentially moving to England, still there at the time of recording, has been there his whole career. Maybe if he had gone somewhere that was a bit more possession focused, then he might have then became that player. But yeah, player, very good team. Said earlier on, I love to see attacking football. Wingers, attacking fullbacks, midfielders that are anything. But more than anything, I love to see a system where it looks like it's working exactly as the manager would want it to. Everybody knows what they're doing, their roles, their styles. I think that is great. This group, for me, certainly the top three, feel like versions of the same team almost, albeit Simeone's is several leagues above the other two. It probably comes back to the point about things getting a little bit samey, but take nothing away. Terrific players in here that know exactly what they're doing, drilled within an inch of our life, as David said, and some insane firepower up front. I really enjoyed this. I got married this year, Spain, so the final was on the. I think it was the night before my wedding, potentially. I was sort of watching this as we go through these seasons with a vested interest. I was quite intrigued to see who would get there, given I was going to be watching it in that environment. And I don't think the final, again, we're getting ahead of ourselves, I don't think it disappointed me, shall we say. But I think Atletico Madrid were a huge part of my year this year. I watched a lot of their games in Europe, and I just liked it. I just love when a team executes. You can tell they're executing exactly what their manager wants, attacking at breathless pace. Just really well organised and compacted. Did not give up shots lightly. Never mind goals.
Finally, then, Group H, 4 previous winners made of that in the build-up to this. Celtic, Ajax, Milan and Barcelona. No repeat of Celtic's heroics against they 1-1 at Parkhead and battered them 6-1 in Spain. Milan did a double as well, a late double in the first game in the San Siro. Celtic might grab a point. It was 2 late goals. And then 3 Celtic and Ajax traded wins in the middle. Things I want to ask about, David, just to mention, in this era that I seem to think that no one can just go and do a job and hold on to something in the final game. Let's go to the San Siro. When Milan just need a draw and it's 0, and that is just wonderfully reassuring to see that a team can go out and just actually do what they're supposed to do. Barcelona guys just seem to be meeting all the time at this moment. Milan first, because I know you guys get an interest there. What's happening at this point in time? They go through in second place, obviously.
Yeah, a real mixed bag of a side, to be honest. There's a lot of names that you know at this stage, but there's a reason they're in Italy at this stage. So, for example, Nigel de Jong is there as well. And the likes of De Chilio, Felipe Mexes, Saponara, Montalivio, who've been there for a number of years. Up front, there's, for it is he, Mario Balotelli is there after his we legally obliged to say controversial spell at Manchester City. A lot of hopes at this time for Stefan El Shaarawy, who's one of the great what-ifs, I think, of Italian football. He's always been just about on the cusp of taking the next step, and he never quite managed it. He's had a solid enough career, but at this point there was a lot of excitement around him that never quite translated. But this is now, I think, illustration of where Italian football has moved to and will stay there, which is players either on the way up or huge names on the way down, who've had their spell in England or Spain and will now be Italy. So it's quite a mixed bag of a squad. I remember my heart twanging pain when they signed Adel Taarabt on loan from QPR. And this is nothing against Adel Taarabt as a player, but AC Milan loaning a player from QPR, I just felt that the world had gone mad.
That was going to be my sole contribution to this.
Yeah, anything about how this league has fallen in the time we've been doing this show, that's considered a good signing for them at this point. And it's still the case now, where we know, so last summer, Milan losing out on a player to Bournemouth. It's economic reality. But I think if you're a football fan and romantic, there's something quite sad about that. But yeah, excellent players in the squad, but maybe not at this, it was still useful when was on it. Solid enough in that league. He was still good in that league, but he wouldn't have been getting games for Man City at this time. Similarly, Essien, I think we all go, oh, Michael Essien, great player. Well, it's 10 years on, from
Yeah.
when he was
2006 is Michael Essien, yeah.
Yes, this is not the same guy that was playing in 2006. So it does have know-how, Martin. And I think you see that in the group stage. And it does have talent. What it maybe doesn't have is explosive world-class talent. It's just a solid enough side that capable has tons of experience, but at no point I think would anyone have looked at that squad and think they could go deep in this competition. There just isn't the firepower there.
Adam, Barcelona then, pants well and truly pulled down, of course, in those semi-final second legs last year. Respond one way that makes sense, which is by the most exciting new talent in the world, in Neymar. A choice of coach replacement, Dortmund Martino, Argentinian. He's come from Newell's Old Boys. How on earth did that happen? Is there a Messi link with what's going on there?
Yes. Messi coach as a youngster.
Yeah, I think to be honest, they're not exactly famed for their decision making. I think like mentioned, the peaks and troughs, they're very much Luis Enrique aside. Coming up soon, we'll be going into a trough for a bit, so I don't think they were thinking further than, oh, Guardiola's away, that's a shame, I'm raging, Guardiola's away, shall we hire his assistant manager? If that doesn't do it, shall we just go?
Martin, you know that you said on the last episode that you shouldn't let the outgoing manager pick the coach. You certainly probably shouldn't go to your star player and go, anybody you'd like in? It's pretty much what
you have any numbers
here.
on your phone?
That was pretty much, look, have you got a family friend? That sort of, and the rest of the squad sort of felt that way about him. That they were like, we had to Google him, and Messi's there. Well, like, here's him when I was 9, my under 5s team. That's Kev. He's a butcher now. It was a bizarre appointment, and as Adam suggested, there just did not last long. But it did seem to be literally. I mean, there were other reasons, but certainly the rest of the squad have went on and said since that they sort of felt it was just somebody that Lionel likes.
I don't think he's suited either in terms of obviously coaching career and things, but while he was also a disciple of Bielsa, which wouldn't really surprise you coming from where he came from, and Guardiola was as well, as we've seen with Van Gaal in terms of their divergence from Rinus Michel's and 15 years before, he was a bit more pragmatic. Yes, he was a position manager, but it was a bit more sort of adapt and pragmatic, which is not really a Barcelona thing. So, yeah.
I felt for the poor bastard, guys, because he had never had this kind of media exposure, and he bristled under it. He was terse. Like, when he exploded at photographers outside his house, I think of us would find it odd, but that was life as a Barcelona head coach. You walk to your car, there will be people taking photographs of you. And again, I think it does shape into our discussion last week about Moyes, that there's a lot more to this than just, is he a good coach? Unless you can absolutely get round them and corset them and keep them in a bubble. But we're either unwilling or unable to do that. And he had a contentious relationship with the press, which in Spain is a bit like in England or in Italy. If you do that, they'll get you, and they eventually do.
Quite a lot of parallels with Moyes, I would say. David, I think you're spot on. There's the biggest club he would ever be at. Certainly for Martino, going and manage Argentina after us, but biggest club he'd ever been at. The pressure of being at that big club, the pressure of following an era defining, as well as being the whole Messi situation as well. So there's probably some parallels there for Moyes, definitely.
Plus supporters, all right, saying that it shouldn't really matter, but it does. It does. There's a credibility thing. And if they don't particularly want you there in the first place, unless you give them something really insanely special almost straight away, the knives are going to be out for you. And then the Barcelona fans were sort of, really? Because I think they were expecting, at least a younger coach, because he wasn't a youngster either. And he sort of looked like a grumpy old man. He sort of looked like that guy from Up.
Very much did. News for the group stage of 2013-14. I always start these recordings saying, have we got enough? Can we get a whole show out of 4 groups? And more than enough every single time. Thanks, David.
Thanks, guys.
Nearly there, Adam. 2
more to go. Yeah, what was that now then? Episode 74?
73. That was
73.
72
Each
and
one.
73. We will finish 75 and then probably do like a wrap up, I'd imagine. But then I'm very excited because then I'm getting into this has all just been a warm up for talking about Brian Deane.
Indeed. Back next week, listeners, with the knockouts, and the Madrid clubs signal their intent with 14 goals between them in that last 16 tie, and Pep Guardiola's Bayern Munich have a very English and very easy route to the semi-finals. Until next time, bye for now. If you enjoyed the show and want to help us grow, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. On YouTube, search for And It's Live Podcast. We've got new deep dives, drafts and breakdowns dropping every other day.